Can you make a chatbot that has an expertise of all over the internet and then specializes in one specific field, and that particular field to be something like Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, that is possible by RAG model, and let's see how. Okay, so let's dive into the context of it, this complete RAG model thing. And it's a quite interesting thing, guys, let me tell you this, because you'll enjoy it a lot. And I've just listed out some topics that we'll discuss one by one. So the first thing that we'll discuss, like, what is RAG model, like complete a layman idea. Even if you have no idea about data science, you'll understand what is a RAG model. Then you'll see what all skills RAG model use, like what all skills it's built on, right? And then we'll see architecture of RAG model. We'll see advantage of RAG model over a traditional large language model. And then we'll see what document that we're using. The document that we're using is the Bhagavad Gita, and then we'll see a code demo of it. So the first thing, like, what is a RAG model? So RAG model is like one of the generative AI model. So generative AI, if you guys don't know, if you're living under a rock and you don't know about generative AI, so generative AI is basically a branch of artificial intelligence where we generate the data, right? So it's like based on the past experience till now. In machine learning, what we do, we predict the data, right? We predict the data, or we do some guess based on probabilities. In generative AI, you can say we predict the whole sentences. Like in easy terms, you can say that it will predict the whole sentences. The common application, the most common use case that you might have used in your daily life would be something like ChatGPT, right? So it's kind of a generative AI application that you give it some instruction, it will do a task for you. It is basically generating the data for you, right, based on some probability model behind it. So RAG model basically is called Retrieval-Augmented Generator, right? So retrieval, R means retrieval, A would be your augmented, and G would be a generator. Retrieval-Augmented Generator, and it basically is a model that is a generator model, but it takes some context into account, right? So in easy terms, you can say that I have a person, let's say I am the person, and I have all the knowledge of the internet, right? And I have all the knowledge of internet, I have spent some time and learned everything out the internet, right? Now you want me to deliver a lecture somewhere, or you want me to give a presentation somewhere, and to give and you allow me to in your institution, or let's say in your college or in your company, to give a lecture or speak about a particular topic, and you give me a script. Hey Shwankit, we know you know a lot, we know you have a lot of knowledge, but let's do one thing. Let's take this context. Maybe it's a context of what the event is about, or it's a context of a specific new technology that has come up that I know about, but it still has some more information on it, and I just want to talk on that particular, taking that particular thing as a context, right? Context basically, it's in Hindi it will means a kind of a memory thing, right? Okay, what is the background of it? So that is what RAG framework does, right? It takes the context into account and then answers your data, right? Then basically generates the data for you. So let's see how how does basically what all technologies are involved in a RAG model. So when we talk about a RAG model, so we have it's majorly built on NLP, it's majorly built on deep learning, right? It's a combination of, you can say, NLP and deep learning. Now these are the AI terms. If you will break them, it will mostly based on vectors, right? It will mostly based on probabilities. It's based on linear algebra, it's based on calculus, right? And obviously the coding of it is done majorly in Python, right? So some mathematical skills, some static skills, and most of the coding skills, they are used in building the generative AI model, and similar things are then used to build your RAG model, which is like again a generative AI model but with a context. So if you see the architecture of a RAG model, it looks something like this. If you see architecture of RAG model, it looks something like this. Let's see how the traditional LLM model looks. Traditional LLM model is something like you have a prompt. Prompt is nothing, guys. Prompt is just like a fancy word for query. As of now, you can say that, right? And you pass that prompt to a LLM model. Okay, this is a LLM model, large language model, basically a model that is trained on many amount of data, trained on huge amount of data, and now it is qualified enough to generate new data, right? So it's an LLM model, and you get an output. Okay, and you get an output. In case of rag model, what happens that you have LLM model plus you have some documentation, right? You have some documentation as well, and that documentation had some, like inside documentation it will divide the documentation into different parts. Okay, so you have that parts as well, and you have this LLM model. So when you give it a prompt, first it will identify where that prompt associate most to, right? For example, in my documentation, if I have given about let's say recipe, my documentation basically it's a recipe book, okay, and it has many dishes. There are some dishes that involves chicken, and there's some dishes that involves, let's say, potato, some dishes that involves mushroom and things like that, right? So if my prompt has mushroom, if my prompt has a word mushroom in it, right, it will give me identification ki, hey, in your context, take the advantage of the mushroom part in the documentation, right, and then answer according to that. Like, who are we giving this instruction to? We are giving this instruction to the LLM model, right? So RAG framework does not eliminate LLM model, it will just add some context to it. Okay, take this statement. Let's say here it is written that that mushroom goes well with peas, let's say, right? So it will take this information in account and then answer me, right? So basically LLM model can give you a lot of answers. Here we are just narrowing down to answer. That can also be one way of looking at it, that LLM model can give you a lot of answers. When we are using documentation here, right, we are basically narrowing your answer. That is another way of looking at it, right? But in general, what I would say is, you see it like it's specializing in that particular document, which is a better word for it. So how does our architecture look now? Our architecture is something like you have a prompt. Okay, you have a prompt, so that prompt will go to the documentation part. Let's say this is my complete documentation, and I will create embeddings of my documentation. So when I create embeddings of my documentation, it creates you can say it will create a vector store kind of a format for my documentation to store, and it will store it somewhere. Now my prompt will take the most ideal chunk from here, right? So when my this documentation is stored, it's stored in a form of chunks, right? So prompt will take most ideal chunk from here, and these two, my prompt and my chunk, right, these two then will get passed to an LLM model, right? This will done automatically, right? If you can understand, if you I'll just give you an idea that it will use cosine similarity to find what is the most favorable chunk out there, but these things will get passed in LLM and you can get your output. Okay, so that is general and most basic architecture for a RAG framework. Again, RAG model basically is called Retrieval-Augmented Framework. You can break the words there. Retrieval basically retrieves the data, augmented because you are generating the new data, and generator is because it's a GenAI model. So that is a basic idea of RAG framework, and we saw it's built on the traditional machine learning and deep learning skills and a lot of NLP. To be honest guys, all of our generative AI models, they have a huge NLP in it. So if you are planning to transition into a field of generative AI, you want to upskill that, make sure you have good hands-on experience with NLP, right? That will be a really plus for you. Then let's see what advantages gives to a traditional LLM model, right? So traditional LLM model, for example, ChatGPT. Okay, so if you're using free version of ChatGPT, it's GPT 3.5. Currently 4.0 is there, but let's take an example of ChatGPT 3.5. So I think ChatGPT 3.5 was trained up to a time of 2021, right? So if you ask something that happened after 2021, right, it will not be able to answer it, right? So basically you can say it is outdated. That is one problem, right? That ChatGPT is outdated, right? Because it is trained up to a particular time. So if I want to give it some new information that I already know, and I want it to take that information into account and then answer me, it's not possible for me, right? So for example, let's say you can take a simple example of let's say something that happened in 2023. Let's say the ODI World Cup, ODI Cricket World Cup in India happened in 2023, right? So if I ask ChatGPT some questions like who was the best team of 2023 World Cup, it will not be able to answer because it is trained till 2021. Although the model is trained fine, to understand emotions, model trained fine to form proper sentences, to do some creative thinking, it's doing fine on that. But if you ask it question like that, that is the question that is coming up after its training date, then it will break. So for that basically raises our first problem, that is the ChatGPT models, these are outdated. Other problem is that you are not aware of the source, right? So for example, if you're doing some confidential thing, okay, let's say you're building a business. You're building a business and you use GPT model or any LLM model for some creative ideas or some business model ideas, right? And it gives you some ideas, right? So because you're investing this much money, you will obviously be concerned and curious about how it is sourcing this thing. So if you're using again 3.5 model, it will not give you the source of this model. And to be honest, the source of all of these output that ChatGPT is giving us is like a bunch of model. First of all, a bunch of data, bunch of website, bunch of data out there in internet. It's not one source, right? So if you want it to come from a specific source, for example, let's take another example. Okay, let's say I am building a AI chatbot for call center. Okay, I am building a chatbot for call center. So now my AI chatbot can answer questions from call center, but let's say this company who runs the call center wants the customer representative to answer in a specific way. Now you can argue that that they can configure the prompt in some way, but there is a limitation of how much you can configure the prompt. So here that particular documentation thing will come in part, that okay, if you give it a proper source, hey, take this as a reference and now give me the answer. It's just taking that as a reference, guys. It's not using that to train. The model is already trained on the whole internet data. Now it's using that thing just as a reference, and we have discussed how it's taking as a reference. It basically divides the document into chunk, find the most similar chunk to your prompt, and then take that particular part as you can say solution to generate your data for it, right? So that is the second disadvantage of using LLM model, that you don't know the source, right? So unknown source. So these are the two disadvantages that LLM models holds, and these two disadvantages are covered pretty nicely when you are using a RAG framework, Retrieval-Augmented Generator. Now once we have completed these things, let's see what we are going to do today. Okay, so what I did, right, I found one of the best document out there, right? The document that has one of the most information of the world, the Bhagavad Gita. So if you guys don't know, it's a Hindu religious book that contains a conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjun, right, when Arjun was in the middle of a war in Mahabharata, and he had some dilemma, right, whether to fight or not, whether this is right to fight against wrong when the people who are wrong are his family. Was he being too greedy, or is it like he became weak in middle of the war, and then Lord Krishna spoke some words to him, and those whole words are being like some people say that it gives you complete answers to every question that you have in your life, right? It's a little tough to understand. Obviously it's in Sanskrit in original, but there are versions of it that has created that in English, and we are using English format to it. Let's have a look at that, right? That what document we are using. So yeah, this is a document that we are using. It's a English version of a Bhagavad Gita, and it gives a situation, what was happening there. It gives a question and answer thing, right? It covers almost all the points, right? What's the theory of creation, who creates humans, and what are the greed, what all greed we should fight, what are types of persons, what are types of intellect, what are type of actions, everything it holds, right? So what we are trying to do here is, in our RAG framework, what we will try to do, we will try to create a chatbot kind of a framework where we put a question and it answers our questions taking in context of Bhagavad Gita. See guys, the model that I'll use here, it will be a 3.5 GPT model. Okay, so the 3.5 GPT model already has some information on Bhagavad Gita. If you will just try on free version of ChatGPT, it will give you some answers. But Here what I want to do, I wanted that model to specialize in Bhagavad Gita, and that is why I'm providing it the Bhagavad Gita ki, hey, take this as a context and now answer me. You get a difference, right? For example, I have read Bhagavad Gita. My mother just allow me to read it. I had some problems, I asked my mother, she knows about it, so I have read it, but I'm not an expert in it, right? I've just read it once or twice, and as a I'm quite young for it, and so I didn't understand much of it, but I got a little bit part of it, and I can refer it if I want to, but I'm not an expert in it. But consider someone who is an expert in that particular book. They have revised it, they have followed that book for a long time, they've talked about it, they have given lectures on it, so you can understand the difference between me and them, right? So that is what we are trying to build here, okay? So let's see the code part, okay? Now and trust me, the code part is quite easy because we're using libraries. We will be using a Python library called LangChain here. LangChain is a library that allows us to do a lot of good things, guys. So let me just confirm that once we are recording it. Okay. Yep. So okay. So let's go to the code part, guys, okay? So if you'll see the code part of it, right, you will see that I'm using one particular library of Python called LangChain, and LangChain just allows us, it's just like we have a scikit-learn library of Python that allows us to do a lot of machine learning. LangChain allows us to do a lot of generative AI. So it has a lot of code in it that allows us to connect with different APIs out there, which gives you an LLM model, and we can tweak parameters in it. It's just a different library for generative AI stuff, okay? So what I have done here is that I have just imported some modules from the LangChain library. I have used LangChain community, LangChain and LangChain underscore OpenAI, right? So you will see that I have used document loader, PyPDF loader, recursive chat splitter, and all of the, and I'll let you know where all these are loaded used here. First thing that I have done is I have used my OpenAI key. You don't try to use it, after this video, obviously I'll deactivate this key. So this is my OpenAI key. You can find it on your OpenAI account, right? Just go there, go to APIs, you will see an activation key, you'll see an API key. Just need to get an API key from there. Then I've used this PyPDF loader library to load a PDF and store it as a doc, right? So that thing is being stored here as a doc. Then after this I've used a text splitter library to basically create a text splitter. So this recursive chat text splitter module is used to create a chunk size of 100 and chunk overlap of 200. So basically 100 chunk with an overlap of 200. And then I've used this text splitter to basically does everything to our document that we have created. It's just like storing your document, guys, there, right? Just like storing your document. And next thing you will see that I'm creating embeddings. So this was the next step that I did, right? Where I created embeddings. You cannot store text directly. To store text, you will have to convert them into vector first, and that is basically called embeddings. So I'm storing that using the text embedding 88002 model. It's again an OpenAI model, and that will be now stored in embeddings. Once this is done, that after that I'm giving it a good prompt. Now the good prompt is really important here. So let's see what prompt I'm giving it here. Let me just minimize this. Yeah. You are a AI trained on Bhagavad Gita, a sacred Hindu scripture. You provide readings from text and offer wisdom and guidance based on its teaching. When asked a question, reference specific verse when appropriate and explain the relevance to the query. Right? So this is basically, it's a prompt of what the model has to do. This is a system prompt, right? When you give a prompt, it has some parts. There's a system prompt where I'm telling my model how it has to behave. Okay. Then I'm giving the format. Okay, the question will come in this particular format. Next thing I have, it has a prompt chat prompt template from template when I'm passing the prompt here. So it's nothing, it's just creating it's just taking that prompt and converting it into a proper prompt template, and then I'm passing this into a Chroma DB. So Chroma DB is basically a vector store. So when you create this embedding, you cannot store it in anywhere. You will need a vector store for it. You cannot store it in any SQL database. You need to create a vector store. Here I'm using Chroma DB. It's quite a new database. I'll recommend you to check it out. I'll add the link for Chroma DB's documentation and description of this video. You can check it out from there. And then I'm creating a retriever, right? So there was a retrieval augmented generator. This retrieval retriever part is really important, because this basically sets up this retriever function from your vector store, right? So this basically will go and fetch the values out from your embedding model to find the similarity of chunks. So now I'm just creating a chat model which will take a model of 3.5 turbo, right? Basically advanced version of 3.5 model, and then a RAG chain which is like an idea of like how your model is performing. So you create a chain for your generative AI models when you have bunch of tasks. So because there are multiple tasks now, in one task you have to do a retrieval as well, and then you have to pass a prompt as well, and then you have to specify where you have to pass a prompt as well, right? So all of those things could be done with the RAG chain model. You will see I pass a context as retriever. See guys, in my prompt I had a context, and I have passed as retriever. What was my retriever? So the complete embedding was stored in vector store, and vector store was passed as a retriever, right? Okay, retrieve the context from here. Okay, next this question. So I'm passing the questions through it will just be it will take as an input, okay, and then I'm passing a prompt. Okay, what is the initial prompt, and an LLM model where I'm passing the particular prompt. Now I've just I can just do RAG chain invoke name and content. It will directly RAG chain invoke, and I'll just pass my name there, whatever query I have to pass, it will do. But for a better understanding, I've just used Gradio to create a simple quite a simple interface to run this. So if you want to understand about Gradio, it's a quite easy way to deploy any machine learning model. Not deploy, but you can see if you want to present any demo of it, it's quite an easy way. So to run this, let's do one thing. I'll just have to run this Python application, right? So Python rag copy dot, the file name is rag copy, right? Let me just save it once, and if I run this, let's see what it gives to us. Ideally should give just a localhost URL on which the application will run, right? And it's a quite an effective thing. Meanwhile this run, guys, let me tell you, this is quite an effective thing, because you can understand, right? I mean, any documentation you have now, any SOP you have now, you can do that task by an AI, right? Till now it was that if it's a customized task, how will AI do it, right? So that thing AI has solved by the use of RAG models. So it is running on a local URL. Gradio also gives you a public URL, but we'll just follow the local URL, and you can see the local URL here. Let me refresh this. Yeah, I think this is a local URL. Let us ask some questions, okay? What does this document has? Okay, let us submit this. Let's see what we get. I'm not sure if we have passed the right URL here. Yeah. So based on the context provided, document contains the English translation of Bhagavad Gita, right? Just got an idea of what it has. Now let's ask some interesting questions, okay? Let me think of some interesting questions. Okay, how to stop anger? Submit. Let's see what it gives us. It's a big issue, guys, anger, right? Let's see if it gives us a proper answer. Okay, so in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna teaches us about the destructive nature of anger and how to overcome it. In chapter 2 verse 63, it states that delusion arises from anger, leading to destruction of reasoning, which ultimately cause one of the deviate of right path. Therefore it is crucial to understand the root cause of anger. See, if you'll see that in every answer it has given me a reference of where it is giving the answer from, because I have specified that thing in my prompt, and it also giving me the answer. So it is emphasized the superior person is one who remains calm and has control over the mind and senses. And in this verse, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to fix his mind on him with loving contemplation after bringing the sense under control by redirecting our focus towards high spiritual ideals such as God, supreme being, right? So basically you focus on God and being more patient by mastering our senses, cultivating detachment from sense objective. We can prevent the rise and desire of subsequent anger. Right? So it's answered it properly. And the thing is, guys, you might be thinking the answer is, if the answer does not feel that much accurate to you, what you can do is you can provide a bigger documentation. I had document that has 52 pages of Bhagavad Gita. You can have a more elaborated version of Bhagavad Gita which has more meaning and many more context, and you can do the same. right? So don't keep in mind that whenever you do this will cost you money, right? So OpenAI will charge a minimal amount of money for each API call. Whenever I'm doing this submit, it is costing me some money, but it's not that much of a money, right? And if you have subscription, you have already paid for it, so it's like worth, right? It will cost you like $100 if you'll pass like 10,000 queries, so it's completely worth. But thing is, it's kind of like magic, right? To be honest, it's kind of like magic for someone who have no idea about AI, and people who know about AI. This is a new thing, right? Here you're training a RAG model, you're training a LLM model for your documentation. There could be many applications of it. This is just one application, and this was interesting because I wanted to try this, so I just thought it will be a good idea to make a complete video on it, because this way you'll understand the power of AI, right? So keep in mind what AI can do, also keep in mind what AI cannot do, and do try RAG models out. If you have any doubts in this video, post that thing in the comments. My name is Shumankit. I create data science content over LinkedIn, over YouTube. I'm also trying over Instagram, although it's not working, but yeah. And you can I currently work as Worldwide Technology as a machine learning engineer, and I create a lot of content out there. So whenever you see this video, if you like, you share this video, that will support me a lot. So thank you, and happy learning.